All right, with that, let's bring in Mr. Greenwood.
Mr. Chairman,
Excellent. Dazza, we see you. Welcome. It's good to see your face.
thank you so much for the generous invitation to testify, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dazza Greenwood. I run law.mit.edu, which focuses on using technology for legal tasks and processes. I have been an attorney in the past, a technology attorney, a state government attorney, and worked on a lot of legislation over the decades. And I'm very proud to have been able to testify before this joint committee in the past on this topic of generative AI, and before that on other topics. Generative AI, however, and in particular autonomous systems, is really my deepest area of expertise and the thing I'm chiefly interested in. I wrote my first AI program in 1989. It was a chat bot called ELIZA. It was it was an implementation of the MIT ELIZA program in a computer science course that we wrote in Lisp, and it really piqued my interest in AI and what's possible. Later, as a lawyer, I helped to write the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, which is now law in every state and territory, and have been working since around 2010 at creating autonomous organizations through whatever the then current technology is. And now, finally, with generative AI, I believe the tools exist to actually achieve what previously had been more like science fiction with respect to how AI can be used to conduct the full life cycle of transactions and business processes. So I believe the topic of this segment of the committee's hearing is on AI liability, data provenance, and automated decision making. And I wanted to call to the committee's attention a bill that is not very well known, but sort of perhaps may fit between the cracks of some of the legislation that you were just briefed on. And it's a model that I would commend for your consideration. It's a California bill, SB 813, and it's sometimes considered a third way. And just fundamentally, it's kind of regulation I think is appropriate right now with AI, which is basically no regulation or close to no regulation during this time of dynamic innovation. But it does have a mechanism for some type of oversight and disclosure, and it's a multi-stakeholder regulatory organization, or an MRO, sort of like a type of self-regulatory organization that it sets up, and that can certify models or applications as meeting certain kind of safety and other responsible use or reliability kind of criteria. And when such a model or application is certified, then it receives a kind of provisional safe harbor for liability, a rebuttable presumption. So let me just break, and actually I'm going to come off mute, or I'll bring you off mute now just to double check if it's appropriate for me to continue to mention how this legislation works, or if you'd rather have me move on to another topic.
No, Dazza, please continue. I think it's interesting to hear a little bit about this.
Okay, thank you. So fundamentally, again, the bill is at SB 813, and you can find it. It's gone through some amendments recently, just a few days ago, and it's kind of working its way through the legislature now. So whether it's enacted or not, I think it's a model that's worth looking at. So the underpinning of legitimacy for these self-regulatory certification schemes is some state agency approves the certifiers, these self-regulatory bodies. In California, they chose the Attorney General. How that might work in Wyoming, I think, is an open question, or if that's even the right mechanism is an open question. There's some minimum requirements that they're independent and that they disclose their funding. The MRO, Very interestingly, and I think importantly, this is completely voluntary, so no model provider or application provider would be required to get the certification, but they could choose to if they wanted to avail themselves of the liability limit, or to also if they wanted to have more publicly available disclosures and to show off the certifications that they got. Um, there are some minimum requirements for plans that the entities have to mention as part of their um, kind of application, and like the big quasi existential or high risk areas that are feared from this technology include chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. And these models are great at science. I can say firsthand from lab projects and research prototypes that we've done. And that unfortunately can be used by bad actors as well. So that raises questions about when these powerful models put maybe like what could be powerful weapons in the hands of adversaries. It requires some red teaming and some broader kind of societal and economic risk benefit disclosures. But other than that, the plans can include whatever the applicant wants to focus on. Um, Let me just kind of whiz through some of this. As I mentioned, they're publicly posted, which is good, which also means if this is passed in California or another state, other states like Wyoming or elsewhere could take the certifications and use them or repost them or say there's some sort of reciprocity, I suppose. Like if you're certified with some minimum standard in any state, you'll be considered certified in our state. And This is the legal part I wanted to go into because I think this is the crux of the whole thing, which is if the company goes through the bureaucracy of getting certified, what they get in return is this rebuttable presumption. And the rebuttable presumption particularly goes to tort, and what it presumes is that you've exercised reasonable care, which is one of the factors you have to allege and prove in order to get, like personal injury or property damage or whatever you're pleading for in tort. And um, it is a rebuttable presumption. So, the plaintiff can introduce some evidence, that rebuts the presumption, such as, I don't know, some major misconduct or something like that. Um, but It's not bad as a start. And so uh, I wanted to just commend to you this idea of a kind of a safe harbor and providing something like a liability limitation in return for things like disclosure and possibly some sort of like stamp that the disclosure has been made according to minimum standards as a kind of third way alternative between doing absolutely nothing and over-regulating in some way that would maybe be unattractive for industry and could chill innovation. I thought it was very interesting, and so I put my name behind it. There's also like a bunch of AI scholars and researchers and people that signed a big open letter saying that this is a good model and it should be looked at. I think that as well. So there's a few more remarks I would like to make if the committee is interested and if there's time on what's happening in the economy right now with AI agents being turned into labor and new things that are happening with new kinds of organizations and how good that is for the economy. But I'd like to pause at this time if there's any questions or comments on what I just mentioned about SB.
Great. Let's see if there's any questions on that particular piece of legislation. Anyone have any questions on legislation? All right, seeing none, please proceed, Dazza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so this is kind of cool. So what I've been doing a lot lately in my business, which is civics.com, which does consulting for companies and sometimes government, is building so-called AI agent systems. The last time I testified, I brought some other experts with me, Alex Riedman from Agent Ops and some others who briefed the committee on what AI agents are. So I'll take that as read for the moment, although happy to go back and backfill some of that. But just in a sentence, it's a way to apply generative AI within a kind of application that lets it act kind of like a person, in that you can give it a goal and it can come up with a plan and has access to tools and APIs and ways that it can do things. It has some like memory that can go across, time, or could have shared memory across different agents, and then can take actions to achieve that goal and can kind of adapt over time, and it can even change its plan. So it's like somewhat autonomous. And it turns out that this is a very good design pattern to get more of the potential value of generative AI out beyond just having to do a prompt and an output. And there are a lot of examples of people doing this right now. In software engineering, for example, there's major there's major disruption in software engineering with AI agents doing a lot of the coding with software engineers, and increasingly instead of software engineers, where the hiring is already becoming impacted because these things are so capable of doing like the entire life cycle of software engineering. And that's not the only area where they're coming out. In my domain expertise is in law, and in the legal industry, there's a lot of agents that are coming through legal tech companies now. Spellbook is an example of a contract system that plugs into Microsoft Word and does contract review and redlining and different analysis. And they have really embraced agents lately, and it's really supercharged their product. And so the agent will look at what the lawyer's trying to do based on a natural language prompt and comes up with a plan. Has multiple different agents, will start to execute the plan, check it against what the goal was. It can revise the plan if it's not working out so well, and then provide a really good, like higher quality output. You may have heard of deep research. OpenAI has a new button just on their chat GPT. So does Gemini from Google, Perplexity, and really all of them now. And they're also agent driven, sort of like this, where they'll go out and look at a bunch of sources, come up with a plan, and come up with a quite high quality final output. So that's in a research report context. This one with Spellbook is in a contract review context. This other one here on the right is my friend John Ney, who I think I had testify like a couple of years to the committee when generative AI was still relatively new, just about the topic in general from a legal perspective. He has since gone on to found a company called Norm.ai, which does regulatory compliance using agents. And so these agents are kind of trained to basically do what a compliance officer would do. So they have all the playbooks and all of the training materials and things like that, and they will look as an input at kind of what the employee is doing on the screen, or disclosures or outputs before they get sent to the client or the regulator or whomever, and will go through the checks and can help make sure that that the company's aligned and can raise issues before they like metastasize into regulatory noncompliance. So anyway, there's just and the last thing I'll just mention is that it's really catching on strong in more of a consumer context now with transactions, which are near and dear to my heart. So you can now purchase items using agents in a different kind of context, of agents that will do like a workflow for you, that will go and look at different products or services that meet your requirements and can find your criteria. And if you give them some purchase authority, they can actually purchase it for you. Perplexity has something called Buy with Pro, which for the $20 a month Pro, they can purchase things for you. I've used that. Amazon just announced that they're going to include agentic purchasing as part of their next Alexa. Payments are part of this. Stripe is a major payment provider in the United States and in some other jurisdictions. They have announced not long ago the AI agent toolkit, which extends their API so that you can provide these AI agents with like a virtual credit card and like a spending limit and some other criteria, and they can go and actually perform the purchases. It does some other things as well. So these agents are really catching on, and more to the point, they're starting to take in a workplace context, like for labor, all these cool things that they're doing are people are realizing they can replace labor or they can augment labor, but I'll just be straight up about this. They can replace labor. And this is great and terrible. And so, the people, I think there's much higher estimates, but I think a very credible estimate is we can get like a 3, 4, or 5% boost in our GDP by 2030 or earlier. I think now that this is like 2 months old. So I think the more credible estimates are even earlier that we'll get that kind of boost from cost cutting and having the capabilities of these agents from companies, but also for consumers, like Consumer Reports, for example, who I do work with. Their innovation lab is looking at having consumer agents that will go and relentlessly look for the best deals for you, and just like be perpetually a fiduciary for you to try to bargain for you and get your costs down and dispute fees and fines and charges and all that stuff. So the societal goods are considered really significant. I consider them significant. And yet, as I mentioned, it's the great and scary because it also raises concerns about what can go wrong when we provide this amount of autonomy to software and also just the second order issues with like labor disruption and joblessness and the potential for I mean, I don't know if depending on whose report you read, like riots or civil disorder and other issues that can happen when there's major job disruption. So I think there's questions that this raises. None of this is like I don't want to be alarming today in May 2025, but the writing is on the wall. I'm here to testify that this stuff is coming soon. Like there's no new innovations needed. It's just a matter of implementation and rollout. And because of the economic imperatives, we can foresee that this is going to be very great supercharge for businesses, but it will have some labor implications as well. So maybe retraining or some other ways to deal with that we could talk about. And the final thing my final slide on this is a little bit more speculative. Everything I just have said to this moment is got high confidence. I'll just disclose that this is lower confidence, but I think it's credible, which is that there will come a time when the same kind of people that have come before this committee talking about DAOs and quasi-autonomous legal entities and even other people beyond blockchain people are really looking at ways to cluster and orchestrate these AI agents together and wrap it as a kind of LLC or a C corp or a subsidiary and basically create autonomous legal entities that are business entities. And the economics of this are just crazy. Like when I was looking at some of the proposals to VCs and other funders, the marginal cost of duplicating one of these businesses is like copy and paste cost and compute. Whereas the cost of standing up like even just another department, much less a full business now, is incredible. It's like it's most of the cost of the business usually, unless it's got capital expenditures. And so just imagine being able to copy and paste a full business and to be able to get into markets and to have businesses supporting your businesses. It's kind of profound. And so I think it raises questions about how to address these changes, which are already upon us with AI agents, but also which are coming. And I think the real question is how to avail your state and all of our states and our country and our people of this tremendous capability that we have, so we can use it for good, for prosperity, and also find a way to manage the disruptions which are inevitable. So thank you for considering my remarks, and I'd be happy to discuss any of the implications, answer questions, or be at your service.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dazza. All right, questions for Dazza based on discussion. Yep, go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Dazza, for that information. Wow, it's really exciting what's going on in the world of AI. How soon do you think that autonomous agents would actually be available in the commercial sense to the everyday citizen. For example, I just have gotten my mom comfortable with using the talking feature on ChatGPT, and now she'll start talking to it like a therapist, and it's kind of funny, kind of cute. But the when will an actual agent that's able to conduct business, when would that be available to the commercial side of things?
Dazza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman. The answer is, I guess, 5 months ago. The marker that I think of for this is Perplexity. And many of you may have heard of Perplexity. It's a competitor partly to ChatGPT from OpenAI and to Gemini by Google, but its focus is more like search. And they were the first to deploy a generally available commercial agent to help with shopping. I mentioned it in one of the earlier slides, and it's called Shop Pro, and it's for Perplexity Pro users. So it's not completely freely available in that you need to pay $20 a month to be a Pro subscription holder. But I would say that is now available, and it was quickly followed by several other agents. So, for example, you can almost everybody now can use the research agent, which is really handy if you're trying to do, like, for example, a bigger purchase like a refrigerator or make a bigger decision about, different options for a wedding. This can take a lot of time to do all the research and to put things together. These deep research capabilities are multi-agent systems, and they're very, very almost science fiction level performant in terms of the quality that they can apply to synthesize a lot of data and give a sensible final report. It's similar to what people might have paid me for to do a research report in the past. I can't sell that anymore since we've had deep research. So these are some examples of existing agents that the general public can use.
Paul, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to imagine a situation where someone has their property taken wrongfully somehow by an artificial agent, uh, acting on someone else's behalf that like took out money out of an account or something like that. That would be that's just another layer of ethical problems that I don't think a lot of people have had to think about.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Thoughts, Dazza?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a critical question, and while most of my work on AI agents has been commercial, I have done some academic research in the area as well. And the first most important topic that's come up in that context is exactly the vulnerability you just identified, which is what happens when AI agents start to do bad things and cause harm to others, and how do we avoid that? And when it happens, who's left holding the bag? And can we even lay our hands on those people? Can we know who they were to start with? Or is it going to be hard to attribute the acts of an agent to a legal entity if it was like a bot attack and they deliberately obscured who they were? And these are all very foreseeable kinds of problems. So the best thinking I'm aware of came out of MIT, and it's called authenticated delegation for authorized AI agents. And if you can do a Google search for that, and we've got a little paper here that describes at least part of how to get some armor to shield yourself from the worst excesses of the kind of vulnerabilities you mentioned by applying existing authentication and authorization protocols, specifically OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect, to these agents, and then maybe not doing business with agents unless you can find one of these signed web tokens to show that it's been an authorized app, and protect yourself in that way. And this is not so different from, like, you wouldn't want to just let some alien application into your network, or like click on an email to start a process if you didn't have a good idea of who the counterparty was. So I'd say the same kinds of things we've had to learn the hard way to defend against in normal web channels like email and text and web browsing, we now also need to figure out how to apply and be aware of and be diligent about through this new mode, which is the AI agent.
Des, I want to follow up on that co-chairman's question. In the past, a lot of scams and phishing and everything else that's basically fraud-based attacks that have come through email and other vehicles have typically been at least attempts that were often a little bit clumsy, poorly worded, something else. They would typically have flaws, and that was one of the ways that you could identify it being disingenuous, is that not enough genuine work went into it, and so bad language, bad spelling, something along those lines would always be a bit of a clue. Now we're at a point where you can write a perfect letter on any topic with all the right details using any AI engine. You don't even have to have a pro subscription to get a pretty good product. So it seems like it's going to be doing an exceptional job of empowering these fraudulent communications where they're much less detectable. And in fact, you could enable it so that you had an API driven system that was auto generating novel letters for every one of the contacts so that it doesn't even go through a spam filter, and there's almost no chance of detection for it moving forward. So tremendous use of resources on that side. And it seems like, regrettably, the counter to that is to now employ AI to try to counter AI actively in this space, leading to the near-term heat death of the universe as a response to just trying to get through email fraud. I mean, is there a better approach to it than that, or is that really the direction we're currently headed?
I'll be frank. I don't know how the future is going to play out in this respect, and I assume the future will be somewhat like the past, although things are changing. And in the past, we could certainly count on wrongdoers who are clever and in some cases resourced by like enemy governments or criminal organizations to do everything they can to exploit our vulnerabilities. And therefore, I'm pretty confident that that's where we're headed, to use like one of your two options. But at the same time, I'm also confident that there's countermeasures that we can find that will not, trigger the heat death of the universe too soon. I hope. So simple things that families, for example, or teams of workers should start to do, which is just good information hygiene in a hostile environment, like behind enemy lines, for example, if you were in military or intelligence. But now civilians should learn how to have a safe word that they do not ever tell anybody else, so that you can, in a pinch, distinguish whether the entity that's called you on the phone that says that they just need to get bail, or they're at the hospital and they need PayPal or whatever, and it sounds just like your cousin and knows a lot of stuff that only your cousin you think would know. It maybe looks like your cousin on video, that you have some last ditch way to disambiguate them, and to whatever. And so I think there's some low hanging fruit things that we can do during the transition phase. There's a lot of companies, including Google, to their credit, I think, that have got deep watermarks now in all their AI text generated and video and image, and I think even audio now, outputs with an algorithm that lets you immediately I distinguish that it was generated by AI from like like writing that wasn't generated by AI. So I think watermarks and different types of cryptographic steganography, just to get a little technical, is another avenue we could look at. But overall, I foresee we'll have more trouble before we have more solutions, because the technology is being adopted quick, and I think that's appropriate, but it's not yet completely secure. And I don't even think we completely understand how to completely secure it because we're, building the airplane, as we fly it with this technology.
Great. Committee, additional questions? I don't mean to take up all the time. Any hands up online, Clarissa? All right. I'll check. Dazza, did you have further presentation or can I dig into a couple of questions with you?
I have no further presentation, and I'm at your service, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. All right. Do you have any questions before I get started? Go ahead. Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm concerned about, and this happened during our legislative session. We saw the release of DeepSeek, the Chinese AI, and I am curious as to what kind of impact the country of origin for a language model would have, and if that is a security threat for like state property or for the people of Wyoming. That came out during our legislative session, and so I was curious what you thought about that.
Dazza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Co-Chairman, I'm concerned about what I would consider a threat from our adversary, China, in the area of AI. And this covers a lot of ground. Most of it is military and intelligence, but just as for civilian business use and family household kind of use, consumer use, I do think that there's some lingering misgivings that I have about what's buried down in DeepSeek and other models in terms of, like, for example, although I've not done myself, but I've seen research that shows there's a bend in the ideological bend in some of the training and maybe post-training. So for topics like Tiananmen Square, you will not get a fair and balanced and accurate view if you're inquiring about that. And there may be other ideological or political distortions that come from these models. And then there's also, in my mind, I think a real question about hidden triggers. So these are just the things that we can test in the open, but are there like Manchurian candidate, style things that you could, do to activate really malicious behavior? It's hard to know. It's hard to test every such possible trigger, but we do know that you can do types of deep poisoning of training material so that if later you introduce certain sequence of tokens, you'll get a very anomalous kind of behavior. So there may be other kind of like attack vectors there. And so I'm somewhat dubious to answer your question. However, the reason I'm hedging to say I'm like somewhat dubious and have like misgivings as opposed to, heck no, like let's ban it, is that it's also kind of good. Like it's a pretty cool model. They had some real innovation that we didn't do that's brought the cost way down. To their credit, I don't mind saying at all, it's open source. And so we can look at it and we can look at the weights and we could replicate things. So I think by and large, I can't begrudge them. And because they're doing things, if they'd asked my opinion about how to do generative AI, and if I was in a mood to help Chinese companies, I would have said do it the way that they did it, minus the Politburo, political bending that we can see that they did. And so, and we do want to have competition, and it's like, a free world. But within that context, I think having some reticence and some, some reservations before relying completely on these models is really, really important because we can't fully understand the provenance or the interests that they're doing the bidding of.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I appreciate competition. I'm a free market guy. I appreciate competition as much as the next guy. I really enjoyed seeing that this made our local industries kind of sweat a little bit, seeing that there is competition out there and that they're able to operate at a fraction of the costs of what the amount of capital that they're bringing in. This is just really a specific question. Do you think that it would be worthwhile to prohibit the use of something like DeepSeek on a computer associated with the state?
Dazza?
Mr. Chairman, I I think a blanket prohibition to me sounds too heavy because it is open source and it's free, and there are types of activities and types of like computers and certain kind of um, little niches and organizations where this could be absolutely the best, a good one of several models to have in order to do certain kinds of things. And so I'd be reluctant to talk about an absolute ban because states are big enterprises and there's a role for open source. And it's hard to have a complete purity test for all open source software. You'd end up with very little open source software. But I think you just have to contain it, I would say. So if you have like high risk, mission critical, like high value or other or like maybe very political sorts of things, that probably would not be a great place to put like, just to be blunt, a Chinese model. And but for other maybe more pedestrian types of things, I think we'd just be harming ourselves as US state governments if we didn't let parts of our organizations have those, understand them, fruitfully use them. So I guess I've got a little bit of like a yes and answer. That's partly because I should probably say I have a bias here that I should disclose, which is when I was in government, I was in a state government working in the IT part of the state government, and I just feel like more open source is generally better than less open source, and more variety and more options for the state workers to have is generally better. And so, I'd be looking, but this is subject to change too. Like if we discover that there's a backdoor or some real security issue that's deeper than the ones that we're aware of now, I might change my attitude to say that it should be prohibited. But based on what I know right now, it seems like it's something more to be wary of and have a watchful eye on, but to use it for maybe like lower intensity type things and to be aware of it. Also, I guess I should just say one more time, I don't know how many of you have used this, but it is pretty cool. Like it actually does, it performs slightly better on some evals and benchmarks that I use than other open source, and it's pretty cheap, it's pretty small, it's innovative. So, I don't think we should hurt ourselves by not having the best tools available.
Thought, Mr. Chairman?
Just one last comment, I guess. It is a fantastic product that is open source, and so I was just curious to see if there was a thought of security concern there, but it's complicated and multifaceted. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Dazza, do you know anything with regard to the training of it, the details of training? One of the things obviously that determines the quality of the capabilities of the AI product are going to be how much information it's trained on and the quality of that information. A lot of our larger engines right now struggle with access to open source and accessible material for training, and that's contentious in the United States. It would be honestly very empowering for an AI developer to ignore intellectual property and just basically program with every bit of information they can possibly get together. Laws be damned. And I'm curious if I don't know how DeepSeek was trained and whether there is a lot of discussion around that, whether it's the same material that GPT and Claude and other engines are being trained on, or whether they used a different data set and a broader training package.
Mr. Chairman, I do not know the exact corpus of content that was used as the training sets for DeepSeek. And I'm not sure, I'd have to search, but I'm not sure that they published it. Which kind of raises two questions in my mind. One of them is so I've used a word without defining it, which is open source, like generative AI or open source models. That's actually not there's no agreed definition. Some people would say, so long as the model is free to download and use, it's open source. Other people like Dan Katz, who I invited to testify a couple of years ago before this committee, and his company say you also have to have the weights of the model available so that you can kind of change the weights. Other people would say, no, that's not enough. You need to have actually like an archive of all the training data so you could replicate creating the entire model from beginning to end, and also the processes of how you did the training and all the test sets and everything else, and these like checkpoints and everything. I don't have a dog in that fight about when something is or isn't open source, and I'm not sure what DeepSeek used. To me, I think the underlying question from an American perspective is what's okay and what's not okay to use in training these large language models. And I, with tremendous respect, Mr. Chairman, may take a somewhat different view than the way that you just characterized it. In terms of laws be damned, part of the law of copyright is fair use, and I think there's a real question about whether the what's happening between the data that's ingested into training and when it gets vectorized and turned into high dimensional vector space for one of these models is so transformative that it falls within fair use, and then whether the outputs are almost always, like 99.9% of the time, look so different from what any one of those individual copywritten materials were that it's transformative, and whether the public good served by having access to this tremendous technology is so great that as a matter of public policy, we do not want to over enforce other aspects of IP law and again harm ourselves from the advantages of this technology. So I have my sense is if there was a role for government with on the topic of how to apply IP law in this context, that we should probably get clearer on things like the safe harbors that I was just showing you in that California bill for model providers to indicate like that we can use a lot of more material and maybe provide some sort of like royalty or forced license or some kind of revenue share or something attribution to people. But I think we're only harming ourselves by artificially restricting the training material. We should find a way to have at least some United States models that have all data, maybe not like nuclear secrets and things like that. So a tiny amount of like exempted data, but if it's just Mickey Mouse and IP stuff and that sort of things, and New York Times, put it all in there and let's have the most powerful model possible, and in that way dominate the transition to a new economy.
I think that honestly, that does resonate with my thoughts and interests on that as well. And it's obviously struggling to get there. I look at, scientific journal articles and know that there's certainly some AIs that have been trained on a broad range of available scientific articles, but there is no engine that has just consumed all of science, and that would be incredibly empowering to have. But it's the intellectual property side of it that stands in the way, not the technology that stands in the way. And it's honestly disappointing that you don't have an AI engine at this point that's read every journal article ever published. That would be an incredible resource. And Dazza, we've got just a few more minutes. One of the topics that we wanted to look at gets into what some of the other states are doing, which is critical decision making and a human in the loop for critical decision making, which is seemingly a relatively low-hanging fruit piece of legislation to ensure that AI can be used for decision making, but can't make adverse decisions without a human taking a look and making sure that decision's made well. And I think we talked briefly about that last year as something that was on the horizon. We see that some states are looking at that and have passed legislation on it. I just wanted to see if you had any comments or advice based on what others are doing on that human in the loop aspect of it, and what best practices we should consider if we draft legislation in that space.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chairman, my thinking on that is honestly in the middle of evolving. If I may, just as recently as a year ago, would have been a strong advocate, and I think I was before this committee, of having human control was the word I was using over these otherwise somewhat autonomous processes at every step of the way. And I remember vividly a couple years ago or more now, working with the committee up for an amendment for the Dow LLC law to ensure that if at some point there were no humans there, that the entity would be dissolved, because you can't have a thing running around in the open market making decisions and taking actions with no humans. I was confident at that point in asserting. I'm no longer so confident about this, and so I'm currently just actively reviewing what my own thoughts are on the best role. One of the major reasons why I'm backing off for the moment, at least, what I'd said earlier to this committee and to others, is because of the results I'm seeing from well-designed, well-engineered AI agent systems or autonomous systems. When these things are done well, what I am observing is that they perform as well or better than the next available human might have performed. And so, I just am wondering about the economics and the prudent kind of governance and stewardship of a system where you say some major part of it has to go and become manual, and whether that still scales or whether you can get the benefit of a full transformation, and whether perhaps other measures, such as if there's an adverse decision, maybe making a appeal or having some other avenue, or taking some of the savings even and putting in a reserve fund and paying out people that may have had a bad decision or something like that. But the idea of just what may be handcuffing yourself to the past because you've taken a major swath of an overall system and caused it to remain manual. I don't know. To me, that sounds like saying, we can move from horse and buggy to car, but on the road, we just have to make sure that we maintain, wagon wheels on everything, because, we're attached to wagon wheels, or we have to make sure that we still have the horse, just driving the car because we love horses, it's sort of like it's an essential component, and we can't have a full transition. So I'd say we should be looking for other ways to make sure we have safeguards and protections, and that we maintain due process and have our values intact. And I'm just no longer certain that having the human kind of maintaining a manual process, just for lack of a better word, over important workflows within a system is the best way to do that.
Great, thank you for that. Appreciate it. All right, I'd love to keep talking about this for a long time, but we are pretty close to the end of the item. Any last questions, committee, for Dazza? Do we have anyone on the select committee that's on with a hand up? All right, Dazza, we really appreciate your time as always, and we appreciate the update, and things are changing so fast. I think we'll certainly call you back, and I hope you're going to be available for either our second meeting or our third meeting. We'll bring you back for some more discussion, if that would be okay, if we can get a little bit more of your time. Your insight is invaluable.
Thank you so much for your gracious comments and the opportunity to testify, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, and members of the committee. And you can count on it. And I thank you for the opportunity to testify. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that testimony. And as an extra little something special, I'm going to now share with you an excerpt from the following testimony by the CEO of iFixit, one of my favorite sites, who is giving some awesome props, which I was surprised and delighted to hear, for the AI testimony. Let's give a listen.
I am the CEO and founder of iFixit. We're the free online repair guide for everything. We help lots of people all over the place learn how to fix everything from tractors to cell phones. Last year, we had people from 53,000 different IPs across Wyoming use iFixit to learn how to fix something. And before I dive into Right Repair, I just wanted to comment on your AI discussion. I think you all are doing a great job, and I couldn't say more positive things about your AI experts that you brought in. So nice job. I haven't seen that work done at that level in other committees.
And I just think about a video that was generated by AI. You look at it from a couple of years ago, and now you look at one, and the quality is leagues, worlds apart. And so this is a rapidly developing situation, and it's really good that we're taking some time to talk about these things.
Yeah, the folks streaming this don't even realize that it's all artificially intelligent generated at this point in time anyway, and that none of us really exist. So good for us for achieving the first AI meeting. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just one more comment too. I think we ought to look at too is, not just as a committee, but